Behind the classroom door, left slightly ajar, Jack Carter, a veteran who had survived the war, stood frozen in place. Before him, his young daughter trembled beside the blackboard, her prosthetic leg quivering softly with each movement, while the teacher, respected by the entire town, let fall cold, mocking remarks. The laughter of the whole class rang out sharper than any bullet he had ever dodged. Jack clenched his fist. This was not education. This was cruelty cloaked in authority, and his child was at the eye of the storm. The old Ford pickup rumbled along the cracked dirt road, its tires grinding over dry, barren gravel. Jack Carter tightened his grip on the steering wheel. He stared straight ahead, where the distant mountain range bled into the sunset, like fractures spreading across the sky. Beside him, Emily sat in silence. 8 years old, yet her brown eyes held something heavier than childhood should ever carry. She did not ask questions, did not complain like other children. She simply sat still, her small hands folded neatly in her lap. Then she spoke. "Dad, may I open the window?" Emily's voice was soft, cautious. He nodded, forcing a smile, though he knew it lacked warmth. Jack glanced at his daughter from the corner of his eye. She was trying to seem normal, trying to be brave, but he could clearly see the trembling in her small shoulders, the stiffness in her hands, gripping the blue handbag, the last gift Sarah had given her. Sarah. His wife's name echoed in his mind like a distant bell. The woman with the radiant smile who had waited for him at home through all those years he fought far away. The woman who had passed on when he was not by her side, leaving behind a void he had no idea how to fill. He had survived bombs and gunfire. He had learned how to shield himself, how to evade, how to protect. Yet everything he knew had not been enough to keep the woman he loved, not enough to stop the illness from stealing the light from Sarah's blue eyes. The truck turned onto a familiar road. A one-story wooden house came into view, simple, with a dark red tiled roof and a white fence faded by time. The front garden lay in ruins. The yellow daisies Sarah once tended were now nothing more than dry, brittle stalks. Jack turned off the engine. "We're home now, sweetheart," he said, striving to keep his voice steady. Emily nodded, opened the truck door, and stepped down. He wanted to say something, wanted to comfort his daughter, but every word caught in his throat. The first morning at Silver Creek Elementary began with bright golden sunlight filtering through the branches of old oak trees. Jack parked the car in front of the school gate. Emily clutched her bear-shaped backpack tightly, her brown eyes shining with a mix of excitement and unease. "I'll pick you up at 3 this afternoon," Jack said, doing his best to keep his voice sounding normal. Emily nodded, a small but sincere smile forming on her lips. "I'll be okay, Dad. I'm big now." He reached out and gently smoothed his daughter's hair. 8 years old, far too young to have to be this strong. But she had been through too much already, and now she knew how to hide the trembling inside, behind brave smiles. They stepped out of the car. Jack took Emily's hand, feeling her small, warm fingers in his own calloused palm. The principal's office was on the first floor at the end of the hallway. Jack knocked, and a voice from inside replied, "Come in." The door opened. Martha Hale sat behind an oak desk, her pale gray eyes looking straight at them. She greeted them with a polite smile, stood up, stepped forward, and shook Jack's hand. "Mr. Carter, welcome to Silver Creek. I'm Martha Hale, the principal and the third-grade teacher." "Thank you," Jack replied evenly. Martha turned to Emily. "You must be Emily." "Hello, dear. I hope you'll enjoy my class." Emily nodded, her voice soft and respectful. "Yes, ma'am." "Thank you." Martha turned back to Jack. "You can rest assured. We'll take very good care of Emily. Here all students are treated fairly." He nodded, keeping his expression neutral. "I'll be fine, Dad," Emily said. Her voice was still brave, but Jack could see the worry in her eyes. He bent down and hugged her tightly. "I'll pick you up early. If anything happens, tell me, all right?" Emily nodded, then followed Martha out of the office. Jack stood there watching his daughter walk away. She moved slowly, her prosthetic leg making a soft sound against the wooden floor. Martha walked beside her, one hand resting on Emily's shoulder. Jack stepped out of the office and walked down the hallway. He was about to leave when he stopped hearing a voice behind him, a voice cold and sharp like a blade. "Careful, Emily. Not everyone can stand as steady as you." Jack turned around. Through the glass pane, he saw Martha leading Emily into the classroom. He had heard her voice clearly gentle in tone, yet carrying something sharp beneath it like a warning disguised as advice. Jack felt that something was wrong. He knew this feeling. He had lived with it through years on the battlefield, the sense of danger lurking, the sense of an enemy hiding behind smiles, behind polite words. But this wasn't a battlefield. This was a school. A place where children were supposed to be protected, cared for. Wasn't it? He tried to reassure himself. Maybe it was just his heightened sensitivity from post-traumatic stress. Maybe he was seeing danger where there was none. Maybe Martha Hale was simply trying to encourage Emily in her own way. Jack did not leave the school right away. He sat in his pickup truck, the engine off, both hands resting on the steering wheel, his eyes fixed on the row of first-floor classroom windows. He wasn't sure why he stayed. It was just that the unease from earlier that morning still hadn't let go. Then he heard a soft cry. Jack stiffened. He opened the truck door and hurried toward the classroom hallway. The crying grew clearer, broken, restrained, as if the one crying didn't dare cry out loud. He stopped short in front of the third-grade classroom. Through the slightly open door, Jack saw Emily. She stood by the blackboard, her hands trembling, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her prosthetic leg made it hard for her to stand steady, one knee bent slightly. In front of her, Martha Hale stood with her arms crossed upright, her cold gaze fixed downward. Crying. Martha's voice rang out not loud but sharp. Crying because you can't do something that simple. Some of the children lowered their heads. Others looked at Emily, their expressions a mix of curiosity and discomfort. Emily pressed her lips together, shook her head, and tried to swallow her tears. I'm sorry, ma'am." Jack pushed the door open and stepped inside. The soft thud of the door hitting the wall made the entire class turn around. Martha startled slightly but quickly regained her composure. "Mr. Carter," she said, as if his presence were a minor inconvenience. "Is there a problem?" Jack didn't answer right away. He moved quickly to Emily and knelt in front of her. Tears still clung to her lashes, her lips trembling. "Emily," he said quietly, his voice tightening. "What's wrong?" Emily looked at her father, then quickly lowered her head. I'm fine, Dad. I did something wrong." Jack turned to Martha. "Why is she crying?" Martha smiled a thin, cold smile. "I was simply teaching her a lesson. Emily needs to learn to be stronger. You know life doesn't favor weak children." Jack clenched his jaw. "You call making her cry teaching?" Martha shrugged. "Tears don't hurt anyone. Weakness does." Emily gently tugged at her father's sleeve. "Dad, it's really okay." She took a deep breath, forcing a smile. "It's my fault. I wasn't trying hard enough." She had never spoken like that before. Jack looked at his daughter, then around the classroom. The children's eyes avoided his. No one spoke. No one stood up for Emily. He stood. For a brief moment, the soldier's instinct surged inside him. He wanted to pull Emily out of the classroom, to confront, to make everything stop immediately. But then he saw something else in his daughter's eyes. Fear. Not fear of him, but fear of what would happen next. If he made a scene, if he confronted her, if he moved too fast, the one who would suffer most would be his daughter. He placed a hand on Emily's shoulder, gentle but firm. "I'm sorry for interrupting the class," he said, his voice low and restrained. "I just wanted to make sure my daughter's all right." Emily nodded quickly. "Yes, Dad. I'm okay." Jack looked at Martha once more. His gaze was not angry, not loud, just cold and deep, like that of a soldier who has marked a target. "I hope you remember," he said slowly. "This is a school, not a training ground." Martha did not respond. She only smiled. The following weeks at Silver Creek Elementary passed far from peacefully. Each afternoon, Jack picked Emily up from school, and noticed her eyes growing dimmer by the day, like a candle slowly burning out. She spoke less, smiled less, and every time he asked, "How was school today?" she would only nod and reply, "It was normal, Dad." But Jack knew it wasn't. On Thursday afternoon, when he went to pick Emily up, he noticed she climbed out of the truck more slowly than usual. She didn't reach for his hand as she always did. Instead, she trailed behind him, her shoulders slumped, her gaze fixed on the ground. "Are you tired?" Jack asked gently. "Yes, just a little," she replied. They got home. Emily dropped her backpack and was about to head to her room when Jack noticed something. On her small wrist was an oval-shaped bruise, like the imprint of fingers gripping too tightly. His heart seemed to stop. "Emily, what happened to your arm?" Emily, startled, pulled her hand back and hid it behind her. "It's nothing, Dad. I just bumped into a desk." Her voice trembled and she couldn't bring herself to look him in the eye. Jack knelt down and gently took his daughter's hand. The bruise was clear and distinct. This wasn't from an accidental bump. This was the mark of force. "Tell me what happened." Emily shook her head, tears beginning to shimmer in her eyes. "Dad, I don't want you to worry. I'm okay." But Jack couldn't let it go. He opened Emily's backpack and took out her math notebook. The first pages were neat, but as he flipped through, the handwriting grew more slanted, more uneven, as if she had been writing while trembling. Then, on the very last page, he saw a crude line written in heavy black pencil. "I am weak." It felt as if someone had punched him in the chest. Those words were not Emily's. She had never spoken about herself that way. Someone had planted those thoughts in her mind. "Emily," he said, his voice shaking with the effort to contain his anger. "Did you write this?" She nodded, her voice breaking. "Yes, the teacher told me to. She said if I didn't remember that, I would never try hard enough." Jack closed his eyes and forced himself to breathe evenly. Martha Hale's face rose in his mind, those cold gray eyes, that knife-sharp smile. He had known it. From the very first day, he had known something was wrong. But he had tried to trust, tried to convince himself it was just his own lingering stress from the war. Now he could no longer deny it. "What else did your teacher make you do?" Jack asked, his voice gentle but firm. Emily hesitated, then slowly began to tell him. She spoke of how Ms. Martha made her clean the chalkboard every day while standing on one leg. She spoke of losing her balance, of falling, of the laughter that echoed through the classroom. The teacher never stopped it, just stood there watching with cold eyes, then said, "Emily, you have to learn to stand firm. Life isn't easy for people like you." Jack listened to each word like a needle piercing his heart. He had fought on the battlefield. He had seen unimaginable cruelty. But nothing hurt more than knowing his daughter was being subjected to cruelty in the one place that should have been safest. "I'm going to the school to talk to your teacher," Jack said firmly. But Emily grabbed his sleeve, fear filling her eyes. "Please don't, Dad. I'm scared she'll be even harsher with me. She said that if I complain, it proves I'm not strong enough." Jack pulled his daughter into his arms, feeling her small body tremble against him. He understood now. Martha Hale wasn't just training Emily. She was dismantling her self-worth piece by piece under the guise of education. That night, after Emily had gone to sleep, Jack sat at the kitchen table and opened the worn military notebook he had carried with him since the war. He wrote, his handwriting rigid and deliberate. "The enemy doesn't use guns. The enemy uses words. The enemy hides behind education, behind the authority of position." He recorded every detail: the bruise on Emily's wrist, the sentence in her notebook, the words his daughter had repeated. This wasn't discipline. This was psychological warfare, breaking a child's spirit to turn her into someone who obeys. Jack knew he had to act, but he also knew that if he acted recklessly, things could become even worse for Emily. He needed clearer evidence. He needed a plan. And this time, he would not let his daughter face the enemy alone. On Monday afternoon, Jack waited for Emily at the school gate as he did every day. He leaned against the side of the truck, his eyes scanning each face coming through the gate. When Emily appeared, he immediately noticed the difference. She was no longer staring down at the ground as she had in recent days. Though she still walked slowly because of her prosthetic leg, her shoulders were no longer slumped. And most surprising of all, she wasn't alone. Beside Emily were two other children. A tall boy with curly brown hair was saying something that made Emily smile. Another child, a girl with black hair tied in a ponytail, walked close beside Emily like a small protector. The three children passed through the gate together, then said their goodbyes. The boy and the girl waved to Emily and ran off toward their own rides. Jack straightened up as Emily came closer. She looked at him and her eyes lit up just a little, a light he hadn't seen in many days. "Dad, I made friends." Emily said, her voice soft but filled with excitement. Really, Jack opened the truck door for her. "What are their names? Noah and Olivia. They're very kind to me." Jack drove them home listening as Emily talked about her two new friends. Noah was a boy who loved drawing and always carried a small sketchbook in his backpack. Olivia was the smartest girl in the class and often helped others with their schoolwork. Both of them sat near Emily in class and had started talking to her just the day before. When they got home, Emily opened her backpack to take out her books. As she did, a small caramel candy fell out along with a scrap of paper that read, "I'll help you. Noah." Emily picked up the candy, her face flushing with emotion. Jack read the note, warmth spreading through his chest. In a world filled with darkness, there were still small points of light, children with pure hearts not yet hardened by the cruelty of adults. The next day during recess, Noah and Olivia pulled Emily aside to a quiet corner of the schoolyard, away from prying eyes. Noah glanced around, then spoke in a low voice. "We know Ms. Martha treats you badly." Emily flinched and looked down. You don't have to deny it," Olivia cut in, her voice serious. "I've seen it too. She always makes you do the hardest things, then laughs when you can't. I don't think that's fair." Noah nodded. "We want to help you, but adults won't believe us unless we have proof." Emily looked at the two of them, a strange feeling swelling in her chest. Hope. What do you want to do?" Olivia pulled a small pink voice recorder out of her pocket. "This is my mom's recorder. She's a journalist, and sometimes she lets me borrow it to record interesting things at school. I think if you hide this in your backpack, it can record what Ms. Martha says," Noah added. "Once you have proof, your dad can take it to the principal or the school board. They'll have to listen." Emily stared at the recorder, feeling both excited and afraid. "But what if Ms. Martha finds it?" "She won't," Olivia said firmly. "I'll put it in the very back pocket of your backpack and wrap it in tissues. She never checks students' bags." Noah placed a hand on Emily's shoulder, his eyes sincere. "You're not alone anymore. We'll help you." For the first time in weeks, Emily felt hope seep into her heart. She nodded and held tightly to her friend's hands. "Thank you." That afternoon, when Jack picked Emily up, he noticed the change again. She wasn't just smiling, there was something stronger in her eyes, as if she were preparing for a fight. On the drive home, Emily told her father about Noah and Olivia, not the whole plan, because she didn't want him to worry, but enough for him to know that his daughter now had companions. Jack listened, gratitude filling his chest. He didn't know who those two children were, but he knew one thing: they were doing what he couldn't, being there for Emily when he wasn't. When they got home, Jack opened his old military notebook and added another line: "Allies have appeared. Hope remains." He looked out the window at Emily sitting at her desk doing her homework. She was no longer hunched over. She sat upright, her handwriting neater, more confident. Jack knew the battle was not over. Martha Hale was still there with her cold eyes and words sharp as knives. But now Emily was no longer alone. And to a soldier like Jack, that meant everything could change. Because on the battlefield, alliances are the key to victory. And in this fight, they had found allies, small but brave ones, children with school bags on their backs, and the hearts of warriors. Hope, fragile as a candle in the wind, was still burning. The phone rang at 2 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon. Jack was fixing a broken faucet in the house when he heard it. He wiped his hands on a towel and picked up the phone. "Mr. Carter, this is Clara Davies, the school nurse at Silver Creek Elementary." The voice on the other end sounded tired but firm. "Is something wrong with Emily?" Jack asked, his heart beginning to race. "Emily's all right. But you need to come to the school immediately. There are some things I think you should know." 20 minutes later, Jack was sitting in the school's medical office, facing Clara, a woman in her early 50s, gray-haired with worried brown eyes. She closed the door, then sat down holding an envelope in her hands. "Mr. Carter, I've worked here for 20 years. I've seen many teachers, many teaching methods. But what I've seen happening to Emily," she paused, searching for the right words, "it isn't right, and I can't stay silent anymore." Jack sat up straight, his eyes fixed on Clara. "What do you know?" Clara slid the envelope toward him. "There's a recording in here. 2 students in the class secretly recorded what happens during lessons. They brought it to me this morning because they knew I would help." Jack opened the envelope and took out a small pink voice recorder. His hand trembled when he realized it belonged to Olivia. He pressed play. Martha Hale's voice filled the room, cold and sharp. "Emily, stand up. Today you'll clean the board again, but this time you'll do it on one leg." Emily's strained breathing followed her small voice, trembling. "Yes, ma'am, but I'm afraid I'll fall." "That's your problem. If you can't stand steady, you'll never learn how to be strong." The sound of dragging footsteps on the floor, labored breathing, then the sound of a body hitting the ground, not a hard crash, but enough for Jack to picture his daughter struggling to keep her balance and failing. A few children's giggles rang out. Then, Martha's voice again, icy and detached. "You see, this is what happens when you don't try hard enough. Emily isn't strong enough, and if you don't want to end up like Emily, you'd better learn not to be weak." Jack turned the recorder off. His hand tightened around it, his knuckles turning white. The anger that had been smoldering for weeks flared into a fierce blaze, but he didn't shout. He just sat there, breathing steadily like a sniper, preparing for a single decisive shot. "I want an emergency school board meeting," Jack said, his voice cold as ice. "Now." The school board meeting room was crowded. The principal, Richard Mills, a gray-haired man, sat at the head of the table. Beside him was Martha Hale, her expression composed, though her gray eyes watched Jack with caution. Several other parents were present as well, including Noah's and Olivia's parents. Jack stood before them holding the recorder. He didn't say much, just one sentence. "I want you all to hear this." He turned on the recording. Martha's voice echoed through the room, each sentence like a blade cutting into everyone's conscience. The room fell silent as they listened to every detail from Martha, forcing Emily to stand on one leg, to the humiliating remarks, to the mocking laughter of other students. When the recording ended, the air in the room felt heavy as lead. Some parents looked at Martha with open disbelief. Principal Richard Mills had gone pale, both hands braced on the table as if trying to steady himself. Martha Hale spoke, her voice still carrying a veneer of calm. "I was simply challenging Emily to help her grow stronger. This is strict education, but necessary for special students." Jack turned to her. His eyes were cold, completely devoid of emotion. He stepped closer, stood directly in front of her, and spoke slowly, each word landing like a bullet. "You didn't teach my daughter strength. You taught her to fear it. You didn't teach her how to stand. You taught her that falling is shameful. You are not a teacher. You are a destroyer." The room was silent. Martha opened her mouth, but there were no words left to defend herself. Principal Richard Mills stood up, his voice firm. "Mrs. Martha Hale, on behalf of the school board, I am informing you that you are suspended, effective immediately pending a formal investigation. What Mr. Carter has presented is clear evidence of inappropriate conduct in the classroom." Martha stood up, her face drained of color. She looked at Jack one last time, not with anger, but with something else, perhaps helplessness. Then she walked out of the room, her back hunched like that of someone defeated. When the meeting ended, Clara approached Jack and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did the right thing." Jack nodded, but he didn't feel the satisfaction he had expected. He had won. Martha had been suspended, but hearing the recording again, hearing his daughter struggle to stand and then fall, left him with a deep, tearing pain. His daughter had endured all of that alone for so many days. He walked out of the school and looked up at the sky. Justice had been served, but the wounds in Emily's heart and in his own would still need time to heal. At least now they could begin to recover. Martha Hale was gone, but her ghost still lingered haunting every corner of the house. On Monday morning, Jack prepared breakfast for Emily as usual. He made toast, poured milk into a glass, then went to wake his daughter. But when he opened her bedroom door, he saw that Emily was already awake, sitting on the bed and staring out the window with an empty gaze. "Sweetheart, it's time to get ready for school." Emily turned to look at her father, then shook her head. I don't want to go." "Ms. Martha isn't there anymore," Jack said gently. "You're safe now." But Emily kept shaking her head, her voice trembling. "I can't, Dad. I can't." Jack knelt beside the bed and took his daughter's hand. Her small hand was icy cold, trembling. He looked into her frightened brown eyes and understood defeating an enemy on the outside was one thing, but healing the wounds on the inside was an entirely different battle. "All right, sweetheart," he whispered. "I won't force you." In the days that followed, Emily rarely left her room. She sat by the window looking out at the yard, clutching the stuffed bear her mother had given her. Jack tried to talk to her, but Emily only nodded or shook her head, seldom answering aloud. On Wednesday night, Jack woke to a cry coming from Emily's room. He ran down the hall and pushed the door open. Emily was lying on the bed, drenched in sweat, her arms flailing as if she were trying to escape something unseen. "Emily, it's okay, Dad's here." Jack wrapped his arms around her, feeling her small body shake violently. Emily opened her eyes, looked at him, and then burst into tears. Not the quiet tears she'd shed before, but deep, wrenching sobs from the very core of her being, as if all the pain she'd been holding in for so long had finally broken free. "Dad, I see her. She's still there. She tells me to stand up, but I can't. I keep falling over and over." Jack held his daughter tightly in one hand, gently stroking her hair. "There's no one here, sweetheart. It's just me. I won't let anyone hurt you ever again." But those words weren't enough. The wound inside Emily wasn't the kind that could be healed by promises. It was deeper, heavier, and would take much more to mend. The next morning, Jack called the school and told them Emily would be staying home for another week. Principal Richard Mills was understanding and promised to send homework so Emily could keep up. But Emily didn't touch the notebooks. She stayed in her room staring out the window or lying on her bed clutching her stuffed bear. On Friday afternoon, Jack sat beside his daughter trying to encourage her. "Is there anything you want me to do? I could read to you or make your favorite meal." Emily shook her head, then spoke so softly Jack could barely hear her. "Dad, am I weak?" Jack froze. "No, sweetheart. You're not weak. But she said I was. She said I couldn't stand. She said," Emily's voice caught tears spilling over again. "She said I wasn't like the other kids." It felt as though an invisible hand tightened around Jack's heart. "Listen to me," Jack said, bending down and looking straight into Emily's eyes. "You are not weak. You are the strongest person I know. You've been through things many grown-ups couldn't endure. You got up every single day no matter how hard it was. That is strength, sweetheart." Emily looked at him, doubt clouding her eyes. "But I don't want to be strong anymore, Dad. I'm tired. I just want to rest." Jack pulled her into his arms, feeling the gentle rise and fall of her breathing. He didn't say anything else. He just held her as if he could somehow pass his strength into her through the embrace. That night, Jack sat alone in the living room and opened his old military notebook. He looked over his entries, his observations about Martha, his plans, his evidence. He had won the battle on the outside, but the battle within, inside Emily's heart, was still raging. He added one more line. "Defeating the enemy outside is not victory. Healing the wounds inside is the true victory. He closed the notebook and leaned back in his chair. He had once believed that once Martha was gone, everything would return to normal. Now he understood psychological wounds don't disappear overnight. They take time, patience, and far more than that. But he would not give up. He hadn't given up on the battlefield, and he would not give up here. Emily was everything he had left, and he would do whatever it took to help his daughter find herself again, no matter how long it took. Saturday night, after Emily had gone to sleep, Jack sat alone in the living room. The dim yellow light fell across the wooden table where he had set an old bottle of whiskey, a gift from a fellow soldier before he left the army. He had never opened it because he knew full well that alcohol solved nothing. But tonight his hand trembled as he twisted the cap and poured a full glass. He took a sip. The sharp burn ran down his throat like fire, spreading from the inside out. He closed his eyes, letting the sensation wash over him, hoping it might erase the images spinning endlessly in his mind. But it didn't. They were still there. Emily sitting on her bed, her eyes empty. Emily crying in the night, calling for her father, but unable to find comfort. Emily saying, "I don't want to be strong anymore." Jack poured another glass, then another. His head began to spin, but his mind remained clear enough to grasp a brutal truth. He had failed. He had failed Sarah. He hadn't been there when she needed him most. He hadn't held her hand in her final days. He had failed Emily. He hadn't recognized the signs sooner. He hadn't protected her from Martha Hale. He hadn't stopped the deep wounds carved into his daughter's spirit. He stood up and staggered toward the mirror on the wall. The dim light revealed his face, a face marked by scars not only from the battlefield, but from everything life had dealt him. Unshaven dark circles under his eyes, exhaustion etched into every line. He looked at his reflection and saw a failure. A soldier with no battlefield left to fight on, yet no idea how to live in peace. A father who didn't know how to heal his daughter's wounds, only how to fight enemies on the outside. "You're not good enough," Jack whispered to the man in the mirror. "You're not good enough to be a father." The ghosts of the past surged back. Comrades who never came home, faces he hadn't been able to save, explosions that still echoed in his head every night, and now one more face, Martha Hale, with her cold smile, reminding him that he had let things go on for far too long. Survivor's guilt crashed over him like a tidal wave. Why was he still alive when better men were gone? Why had Sarah suffered through that illness, while he who had seen so much brutality was still here? Why did Emily have to endure everything she had simply because he was her father? Jack punched the wall not hard, just enough to feel pain spread through his knuckles. He wanted to scream, to smash something, to do anything to release the rage and despair inside him. But he didn't. Emily was sleeping in the next room, and he didn't want to wake her. He slid down to the floor, his back against the wall, his head bowed. The tears ones he had been holding back for so long finally came. Not heavy sobs, just small, silent tears, as if his body was too exhausted to cry properly anymore. A thought flashed through his mind, sharp as a blade. Maybe Emily would be better off without him. Maybe she needed a different father, one who didn't carry the weight of war, the ghosts and nightmares. Maybe he should take Emily away from this town, find a new place, a fresh start. Or maybe he should let her live with someone better. The thought made him shudder. He remembered what Sarah had said before she died. "I believe in you, Jack. I believe you'll take care of Emily. You're the best father she could ever have." But she had been wrong. He wasn't the best father. He was just a worn-out soldier full of scars who didn't know how to love the right way. Soft footsteps sounded in the hallway. Jack startled and quickly wiped his eyes. Emily appeared in the doorway wearing her pink pajamas, clutching her stuffed bear. She looked at him, worry in her eyes. "Dad? Are you okay?" Jack tried to smile, knowing it wasn't convincing. "I'm fine, sweetheart. I'm just a little tired." Emily walked over and sat beside him. She didn't say anything, just rested her head on his shoulder as if she understood that sometimes silence was the best thing. Jack placed his hand on his daughter's shoulder, feeling the small warmth of her body. And in that moment, he realized something. No matter how much he had failed, no matter how many ghosts he carried, Emily still needed him. Not because he was perfect, but because he was her father. And maybe that was enough. "I love you, Dad," Emily whispered, her voice soft but sincere. Jack pulled her close, no longer hiding his tears. "I love you too, Emily. I won't give up. I promise." They sat there in the dim light, father and daughter leaning against each other like two broken pieces trying to fit back together. And though the road ahead was still long, though the wounds had not yet healed, at least they were no longer alone. On Sunday afternoon, Jack was cleaning the house when there was a knock at the door. He wiped his hands on a towel, opened it, and found a man standing on the porch, about 40 years old, short graying hair, neatly trimmed black-rimmed glasses, wearing a light blue shirt and khaki pants. The man smiled warmly and extended his hand. "Mr. Carter, I'm Daniel Turner, the new third-grade teacher. I'm replacing Ms. Hale." Jack shook his hand, feeling the warmth and sincerity in the grip. "You came here to see Emily," Mr. Turner said gently. "I heard she's been out of school. I wanted to stop by and see how she's doing." Jack hesitated. He wasn't sure whether Emily would want to meet a new teacher. But there was something in Mr. Turner's eyes, an unmistakable sincerity that made him nod. "Please come in. But I'm not sure Emily will want to talk." Mr. Turner stepped inside and glanced around the house. "I understand. Sometimes just knowing that someone cares is already a step forward." Jack knocked softly on Emily's bedroom door. "Sweetheart, there's a visitor who'd like to meet you." There was no response. Jack opened the door slightly and looked in. Emily was sitting on the bed, clutching her stuffed bear, staring out the window. She didn't turn to look at him. "It's your new teacher," Jack said gently. "He wants to meet you." Emily shook her head. "I don't want it, Dad." Mr. Turner appeared at the doorway, smiling. "Emily, right, I'm Mr. Turner. I know you don't feel like talking, and that's okay. I just wanted to sit here for a bit, if you don't mind." Emily didn't answer, but she didn't refuse either. Mr. Turner pulled a wooden chair over to the window and sat down, not facing Emily directly, but looking out into the yard. "You know," he began, his voice warm and steady like a quiet stream. "When I was little, I was afraid of going to school too. Not because I didn't like learning, but because I thought I wasn't as good as the other kids. I read slowly, I wrote slowly, and the other children used to laugh at me." Emily still didn't turn around, but Jack noticed her shoulders were no longer as tense as before. Mr. Turner continued. "Then I had a teacher named Ms. Ann. She didn't force me to learn faster or write better. She just said, 'Daniel, go at your own pace. Everyone has their own path.' And she waited for me day after day until I began to believe in myself." He paused and smiled. "Now I'm a teacher, and that's what I want to do for my students. I never force anyone to be faster, stronger, or like someone else. Everyone has their own worth." Emily turned her head slightly and looked at Mr. Turner with curiosity. You really think that I don't just think it," Mr. Turner said firmly. "I know it, and I also know you've been through something very hard. But that doesn't make you weak. It only shows how strong you've been." Jack stood quietly at the door, listening, his heart slowly warming. Mr. Turner was nothing like Martha Hale. He didn't impose or demand. He was patient, genuine, and gave Emily the space to choose for herself. Mr. Turner stayed for another hour, telling light-hearted stories about the class, about Noah and Olivia, two classmates who kept asking about Emily. He never asked whether Emily wanted to come back to school. He only said, "Whenever you're ready, your classmates and I will be waiting." When Mr. Turner got ready to leave, Emily stood up from the bed and slowly walked to the door. She looked at him and asked softly, "Teacher, you won't make me do hard things, will you?" Mr. Turner knelt down to Emily's eye level. "I will never make you do anything you're not ready for. But if you want to try, I'll be there to help you. No one gets left behind in my class." Emily nodded. Tears streamed down her face again, but this time not from pain from being moved. She hugged Mr. Turner and he gently patted her back. "You'll be all right," he whispered, "and I'll be there with you." After Mr. Turner left, Jack sat beside Emily on the bed. She was still holding her stuffed bear, but there was a little more light in her eyes now. "Dad," Emily said, her voice trembling, I think I want to try going back to school." Jack looked at his daughter, pride filling his chest. "I'm very proud of you." Emily hesitated, then said, "But I need to wear my prosthetic leg again." I threw it away. Jack stood up and went to the corner of the room where the prosthetic leg lay under the bed. He picked it up, wiped off the dust, and handed it to Emily. "Here you go. I'll help you." Emily took the prosthetic leg and looked at it with a complicated expression. Then she nodded and let her father help her put it back on. Once it was fitted, Emily stood up and took a few careful steps. She wobbled, but she didn't fall. "See, Dad," Emily smiled faintly. "I can still stand." Jack hugged his daughter, his heart overflowing with a feeling he couldn't quite name, a mixture of hope, pride, and boundless love. "I always knew you could," he whispered. And in that moment, Jack realized something important. Running away was not the answer. Facing things, no matter how painful, was the only way forward. He had learned this lesson from his own daughter, an 8-year-old girl with a prosthetic leg, but a heart braver than any soldier he had ever known. And from Mr. Turner, the teacher who planted seeds of hope in wounded souls. The battle was not over, but at least now they had a direction. On Monday morning, sunlight slipped through the windows, illuminating the small house. Jack woke up early and prepared breakfast for Emily: toast with strawberry jam, a glass of warm milk, and a red apple. He stood by the stove, gazing out the window, his heart filled with both anticipation and anxiety. Today was the day Emily returned to school. Soft footsteps sounded in the hallway. Emily appeared wearing a light blue dress her mother had once bought for her, her hair neatly tied back, a backpack on her shoulders. Her prosthetic leg was back in place, and though her steps were still careful, there was no longer the hesitation that had marked them before. "I'm ready, Dad," Emily said, her voice quiet but steady. Jack knelt down to her eye level. "I'm very proud of you. You know that, don't you?" Emily nodded and smiled. "I know, Dad." They ate breakfast in silence, but not the heavy silence of before. This was a peaceful silence, one that needed no words, only each other's presence. The drive to school was familiar, but today it seemed bathed in a new kind of light. Jack drove, occasionally glancing at Emily in the rearview mirror. She looked out the window, her hands resting on her backpack, fear no longer in her eyes, replaced instead by a quiet determination. When they arrived, Jack parked in front of the school gate. He opened the door for Emily, and this time she didn't need his hand. She stepped down on her own, stood upright, and looked up at him. "Dad, I can walk by myself." Jack looked at his daughter, pride and emotion welling up inside him. He knew this was an important moment, the moment he had to let go to allow her to take her own steps. "I know you can," he said, bending down to kiss her forehead. "But if you ever need me, I'll always be here." Emily nodded, then turned and walked through the school gate. Jack stood there watching her go. He didn't hover or follow. He simply stood still, letting Emily enter her world on her own. In the schoolyard, Emily walked slowly, taking in her surroundings. A few children glanced at her, but there were no mocking looks like before, just curiosity. And then they went back to playing. Then she heard her name. Emily, Noah, and Olivia ran toward her, their faces bright. Noah waved while Olivia wrapped Emily in a tight hug. "We missed you so much," Olivia said excitedly. "Class isn't as fun when you're not there," Noah added with a smile. Emily felt warmth spread through her heart. She wasn't alone anymore. She had friends who had stood by her during her hardest days. They walked into the classroom together. Mr. Turner was standing at the door greeting each student. When he saw Emily, he smiled, pride shining in his eyes. "Welcome back, Emily." "Thank you, Sir." Emily replied, her voice more confident now. The classroom was no longer a frightening place. There were no cold stares from Martha Hale, no words sharp as knives. Instead, the walls were covered with students' drawings, the desks arranged in small groups so children could learn together, and Mr. Turner's warm, steady voice filled the room. Emily sat down at her desk next to Noah and Olivia. She opened her notebook, picked up her pencil, and for the first time in weeks, she felt like she truly belonged. During recess, Emily stood at the edge of the playground, watching the other children run around. She wanted to join them, but a trace of hesitation remained. Then Noah ran over and took her hand. "Come play with us, but I can't run very fast," Emily said softly. Noah shook his head. "That's okay. We don't need to run fast. We just need to have fun." Olivia nodded. "That's right. And you know what? I think you're really strong. Not everyone can come back after what you've been through." Emily looked at her friend's gratitude filling her heart. She nodded and went with them. Her steps were slower, but Noah and Olivia always matched her pace, never leaving her behind. They played, tag, laughed, and Emily felt joy, something she had lost for so long, beginning to return. At the end of the school day, Jack waited at the gate. When Emily came out, he immediately saw the change. She was no longer looking down her shoulders, no longer slumped. She walked with a new confidence and smiled when she saw him. "Dad, today was fun." Jack opened the car door for her, happiness filling his chest. "Tell me about it." On the drive home, Emily talked about her class, about Mr. Turner, about Noah and Olivia. She told him about the games, the lessons, and how she had answered the teacher's question on her own without fear. Jack listened, smiling. He was no longer worried, not because all danger was gone, but because he trusted his daughter, trusted her strength, trusted the courage she had shown. When they got home, Emily ran to her room, set down her backpack, then came back to him. "Dad, there's something I want to say." "Go ahead," Jack said, sitting beside her. Emily looked down at her prosthetic leg, then back up at him. "I used to think this leg was a sign of weakness, but now I understand. It's not a flaw. It's a medal of courage. Because I didn't give up." Jack hugged his daughter tightly, unable to hold back his tears. "You're right, Emily. You're the bravest person I know." They sat there together, father and daughter, as the gentle light of sunset streamed through the window. And this time, the silence wasn't painful. It was soft and warm, like a promise that everything would be all right, because they had weathered the storm. And now they were moving forward together, their steps finally in harmony. June arrived, and summer scattered bright golden sunlight across the town of Silver Creek. The grounds of Silver Creek Elementary were beautifully decorated for the end-of-year ceremony. Colorful ribbons hung everywhere, chairs neatly lined up, and a small stage set up in the middle of the yard. Jack sat in the parents section, wearing a crisp white shirt, the nicest outfit he owned. He glanced around and saw familiar faces, Noah's and Olivia's parents, Clara Davies, the school nurse, and many other parents. Everyone was smiling, chatting, wrapped in a festive atmosphere. But Jack was focused on only one thing: Emily. She was sitting in the students' section next to Noah and Olivia. Her brown hair was neatly tied back, and a simple white dress highlighted her sun-kissed skin. She was smiling, talking with her friends, with no trace left of the frightened, withdrawn child he had seen just months before. The ceremony began. Principal Richard Mills stepped onto the stage, opening with words of welcome and thanks. Then came the awards: Academic Excellence, Most Improved, Student Outstanding Participation. Each time a child's name was called, applause rang out, and Jack clapped along with everyone else. Then Mr. Turner stepped onto the stage. He held the microphone, his warm voice carrying across the yard. "And now we have a special award. This is the Inspiration Award, given to a student who has overcome challenges, refused to give up, and become an example for all of us." Jack straightened in his seat, his heart beginning to race. This year, this award goes to a truly special student. She has faced hardships many adults could hardly imagine. Yet she stood up, she came back, and she showed us that strength does not mean never falling, it means always finding the courage to stand again. He paused and smiled. Emily Carter, please come up here. Applause thundered through the crowd. Jack rose to his feet, clapping as hard as he could, tears streaming down his face. Emily stood, her cheeks flushed with emotion, but her eyes shone brightly. She walked toward the stage, step by step, her prosthetic leg tapping against the wooden floor in a steady rhythm, not the sound of weakness, but the rhythm of determination, perseverance, love, and faith. When Emily reached the stage, Mr. Turner placed a small bronze medal around her neck engraved with the words, Inspiration Award, 2025. She held the medal, looked down at it, then back up at Mr. Turner with deep gratitude in her eyes. Would you like to say a few words, he asked, handing her the microphone. Emily took it and looked out at the audience. She found her father standing among the crowd, both hands pressed to his chest, tears running freely down his cheeks. She smiled and spoke, her voice soft but clear. I want to thank my dad. He never gave up on me no matter how weak I felt. He taught me that strength doesn't mean never being afraid, it means facing that fear. I love you, Dad. Jack could no longer hold back. He stepped forward up onto the stage and wrapped his daughter in a tight embrace. Applause erupted again, but this time Jack noticed no one else. He held Emily close, felt her small heart beating against him, felt her warmth, and knew they had made it through. That evening after the ceremony ended, Jack and Emily went home. They sat together on the porch looking up at the star-filled sky. Emily was still wearing her medal, glancing down at it now and then with a quiet smile. Dad, Emily said gently, do you think Mom would be proud of me? Jack looked at his daughter, emotion filling his heart. Your mom has always been proud of you, Emily, and she's looking down at you now, smiling. Emily nodded and rested her head on his shoulder. I miss Mom. So do I, sweetheart. But I think your mom left me the best gift of all you. They sat there in silence, but not the painful kind anymore. This was the silence of peace, of healing, of love that had endured every trial. Late that night, after Emily had gone to sleep, Jack sat alone in the living room. He opened his old military notebook, the one that had followed him through years of war, filled with tactics, plans, and more recently reflections on the battle with Martha Hale. He turned to the last page, picked up his pen, and wrote his final line. There are battles that only end when we learn how to love. War taught me how to survive, but Emily taught me how to live. He closed the notebook, placed it in a drawer, and locked it. He no longer needed it. The war was over, not because danger no longer existed, but because he had finally found what he had been searching for all along, peace of mind. He looked out the window at the moonlight illuminating the dirt road in front of the house. He thought of Sarah, of the words she had once said, "You'll be all right, Jack. You and Emily will find your way." And she had been right. Tears filled Jack's eyes again, but this time they were not tears of pain. They were tears of happiness, tears he hadn't shed in 20 years, tears of a soldier who had finally come home, not just in body, but in spirit. He stood up, walked into Emily's room, and looked at his daughter sleeping peacefully. She was hugging her stuffed bear, the medal still around her neck, glinting softly in the moonlight. Jack bent down and kissed her gently on the forehead. "Thank you, Emily. You saved me." Then he stepped out and quietly closed the door, letting Emily continue her dreams, dreams no longer filled with nightmares, but with hope and goodness. And on that night, beneath a sky full of stars, Jack Carter, the former soldier, the scarred father, finally found the peace he had searched for all his life. Because sometimes the greatest medals are not the ones we earn on the battlefield, but the ones we give each other through love. The story of Jack and Emily reminds us that courage is not always about charging forward right away. Sometimes it means staying put, watching, waiting, and quietly protecting while the truth still needs time to come to light. All it takes is one father who refuses to turn away for a child to avoid losing herself. If this story touched you, please follow and share it to help spread stories of love awareness and the protection of children. Because somewhere out there are still Emilys holding back their tears in classrooms and Jacks who need to know that their patience can save an entire childhood.